He was a billionaire with everything except a soul. She was a small-town girl with nothing but her heart. When he took her virginity on a cruel bet, he thought it was just a game. But what she did next would change everything. This is not just a love story. This is a story about betrayal, truth, and the kind of forgiveness that can break a man down, only to rebuild him into someone new. Stay until the end, because this heart-stopping journey will leave you speechless and might just heal something inside you too. Mickelson was only 29, but his name carried more weight than most world leaders. Not because of kindness or wisdom, because of money. Old money, ruthless money, cold money. He wore suits tailored to his soul, expensive and empty. His eyes were sharp, the kind that had never known what enough meant. Fast cars, private jets, a gold-plated life with no trace of warmth. He didn't believe in love. He believed in ownership, in winning. And his favorite game? People. That Friday night, inside the crystal-lit lounge of the Limestone Club, the air was thick with ego. Laughter bounced off marble walls, fueled by aged whiskey and inherited arrogance. Mickelson, in his corner booth, tipped his glass and said with a smirk, "Let's make it interesting tonight." His friends leaned in, bored of women they couldn't break and parties they couldn't remember. "I'll take the virginity of the next small-town girl who walks in here." They blinked. "You're serious?" "1 week," he continued, "just 1 week. If I fail, I'll write a check for $5 million to the man who bets against me." The room exploded with laughter. Glasses clinked, hands shook. The bet was sealed with the same confidence he used to close billion-dollar deals. And just as the echo of their cheers faded, she walked in. Alice. She wasn't dressed for this place. No silk, no heels, no diamonds. Just a soft blue dress that hugged her shyly. A canvas tote on one shoulder. A light in her eyes the world hadn't crushed yet. She paused at the entrance, wide-eyed, like someone who had stepped into a dream and didn't want to wake up too fast. Mickelson saw her, and something in him stuttered. Not his breath, not his heart, but something lower, deeper, something he didn't recognize. "Perfect," his friend whispered beside him. But Mickelson didn't hear. He stood, straightened his cuffs, ran a hand through his slicked hair, and walked toward her not as a man, but as a mask. "Hi there," he said, voice smooth like velvet over steel. "You look a little lost." Alice smiled politely, unsure. "First time in the city," she replied. "Just moved here today." Her voice was soft. Not weak, just unguarded, like someone who believed the world might still be good. "I'm Michael," he lied. "Let me show you around." Alice hesitated, then nodded, because no one else had spoken to her all night. And just like that, the game began. A girl looking for a fresh start. A man chasing a cruel bet. But fate was watching, and fate was tired of games. His name wasn't Michael, but when he said it, it rolled off his tongue with such ease, even he almost believed it. Lying came naturally to Mickelson, but this lie felt heavier. Alice looked up at him with that open, honest face, the kind of face the world usually tries to change. Her lips parted slightly in a smile. "Nice to meet you, Michael." And just like that, he was no longer the man she needed protection from. He was the man she thought might protect her. He offered to walk her to the bus stop. She said yes. They talked about the weather, the city lights. He asked questions not because he cared yet, but because he wanted to win. But then she laughed. Soft and real. It wasn't rehearsed or flirtatious. It was the laugh of someone who had never learned to fake anything. And something in him cracked, just a little. The next day, he brought her coffee. She had told him her favorite, vanilla oat milk with cinnamon. He remembered. That surprised even him. They walked through the city, her eyes lighting up at murals, at street musicians, at food trucks like they were magical things. "Everything feels alive here," she said. He watched her more than he listened. Watched the way she touched life gently, like it might bruise. She didn't see herself as beautiful, but she was. Not because of how she looked, but because of how she saw the world. He took her to a rooftop one night. The lights below looked like stars that had fallen and made peace with the earth. Alice leaned on the railing. Her voice was quiet. "I've never done anything like this. With anyone." Mickelson wanted to lie again, say something charming, but all he could say was, I'm glad you're here. Over tacos and soda at a corner food stand, she told him about her life back home. Her mother worked 2 jobs. Her father died when she was 16, heart failure. She'd spent most of her youth taking care of her little brother. No parties, no boyfriends, no time for mistakes. I guess I never had space to fall in love, she said, staring at her hands. He didn't speak. She looked up, eyes shining. But I still believe in it. I know it's real, somewhere. Mickelson smiled, but it felt crooked. Because he wasn't somewhere. He was right there, pretending. By the 5th day, she was looking at him with something close to wonder. She didn't know she was handing him her heart, piece by piece. And he was collecting it, not to treasure it, but to win a bet. That night, she sat beside him in a quiet park. Her shoulder brushed his. I want to tell you something, she whispered. He nodded, jaw tight. I've never been with anyone, not like that, and I've always told myself I'd wait until it was real. Mickelson swallowed. The words hit him like thunder inside a quiet chapel. Guilt should have risen. Instead, something worse did, feeling. He looked at her, not like prey, not like a prize, but like something sacred. And for the first time in years, he didn't want to play. He wanted time to stop, but the bet, the money, the pride, it all clung to him like a shadow that would not let go. He smiled again softly, but inside he was drowning. Because for the first time, Mickelson feared that the girl he meant to ruin might be the one who could ruin him. The sky outside the cabin was painted in shades of gold and charcoal. Trees stood tall and silent like ancient witnesses. Inside, everything glowed with a soft, golden warmth. Mickelson had rented the cabin days earlier, for the plan, he had told himself. But now, as he lit the last candle and saw Alice walking through the door, he forgot the script. The game, even the lie that had brought them there. Alice stood in the doorway, her simple blue dress fluttering at the knees. Her hair was loosely tied, a few strands falling into her eyes. She tucked them behind her ear and smiled. It wasn't a seductive smile. It was a trusting one that said, I feel safe with you, and it shattered him inside. They sat across from each other at the small wooden table. She laughed at the way he burned the garlic bread. He smiled at the way she held her fork like it was made of porcelain. Dinner was quiet. Not because there was nothing to say, but because something unspoken had settled between them, like a storm hovering, waiting to break. But it wasn't fear. It was feeling. Real and deep and terrifying. Afterward, they sat by the fireplace. Mickelson poured her tea. Alice looked at him and said, You make me feel like I'm not invisible. He blinked. She didn't know how much that crushed him. Later, in the soft light of the cabin bedroom, Alice stood by the window, nervously twisting the edge of her dress. I've never done this before, she whispered, almost ashamed. You don't have to, Mickelson replied, heart hammering. But she turned, eyes calm. I want to, with you. He swallowed hard. His hands trembled slightly as he reached for hers. He felt unworthy. But she didn't see that. She saw the man she believed him to be. The one who listened. The one who remembered her coffee. The one who asked about her dreams and looked at her like she was more than enough. They kissed, gently at first. Her lips tasted like hope. He touched her like she was something fragile but not breakable, sacred. And then she gave herself to him. Not just her body, but her trust, her belief in love, her belief in him. It wasn't wild, it wasn't rushed. It was slow, quiet, like the unfolding of a flower in the morning. They lay tangled in sheets and breath, the firelight flickering across their skin. She whispered his name, Michael, before drifting off into sleep, her head resting on his chest, her heart full. But Mickelson couldn't close his eyes. He stared at the ceiling, drowning in silence. The ceiling fan moved slowly, like time mocking him. The room felt heavy, filled with everything he didn't deserve. He looked at her sleeping, peaceful, radiant, the curve of her shoulder, the softness of her breath. Then he slipped out of bed and walked to the kitchen. The moment he touched the cold counter, the lie hit him full force. His body bent as if punched in the gut. He grabbed a wine glass and crushed it in his palm. Shards bit into his skin, blood trickled down. But he didn't flinch. The pain was welcome, because it was finally real, unlike the man he had been pretending to be. He stared at the blood, red, alive. And for the first time in his adult life, Mickelson hated himself. She had given him something sacred. Not just her body, but her belief, her faith, and he had taken it under false pretenses. A man with everything had stolen the one thing he could never repay, and now she was asleep in the next room, whispering the name of a man who didn't exist. And he stood alone in the dark, holding a bleeding hand and a soul even more shattered. The morning sunlight spilled across the sheets like gold, but Alice woke up to cold skin and an empty pillow. She stretched out her hand where he had been, but there was nothing. No warmth, no note, no kiss on the forehead, just silence. At first, she told herself it was okay. Maybe he went to get breakfast. Maybe he wanted to surprise her. Maybe he cared. She showered, dressed. She even smiled in the mirror, just a little, because last night had been real. It had meant something. Hadn't it? She went to the diner for her shift, trying to focus. Pouring coffee, taking orders. But her hands trembled each time the doorbell above the entrance chimed. Every hour that passed without a call, without a visit, her hope cracked a little more. By afternoon, worry became a dull ache, so she stepped outside to breathe. And that's when she saw him. Mickelson stood across the street, surrounded by men in suits, laughing loudly, cigars in hand. It was like he had stepped out of a different world. Not the gentle, soft-spoken Michael she had made love to, but someone colder, louder, emptier. She took a step forward, her lips parted to call his name. Then it happened. One of the men slapped him on the back. "Told you you'd win that bet, man. Didn't think you had it in you." Laughter erupted. Mickelson flinched. Not because of the joke, but because his eyes had just met hers. Alice froze. The blood drained from her face. Time stopped. The sounds blurred into a ringing in her ears. She stared at him, disbelief ripping through her like a blade. Her knees trembled. The truth sank in like poison, slow and total. It was never love. It was a game. She had been the game. She didn't say a word. Didn't scream, didn't cry. She simply turned and walked away. Her heart didn't break all at once. It shattered with each silent step she took down the sidewalk. One for every lie. One for every touch. One for every dream she had started to believe in. That night, Mickelson stood outside her apartment building. His eyes were red, hands shaking with guilt. He rang the bell, knocked, waited. Nothing. Finally, her landlord opened the door with a sleepy grunt. "You're too late," he said. "She packed her things this morning. Said she was going somewhere quiet." Mickelson stood there in the hallway, drowning in the weight of what he'd done. Not just the lie, not just the bet, but the loss. Because for the first time in his life, he had felt something real. And now she was gone. Not because he didn't deserve her, but because he never saw her as a person, until it was too late. He didn't lose the bet. He won it. And in winning, he lost everything. 3 weeks, 21 days, 504 hours of silence. That's how long Mickelson had been searching. For her. For answers. For forgiveness. But mostly, for a way to undo what could never be undone. She had vanished like morning fog. No forwarding address, no phone number. No one had seen her. Not at the diner, not at the old apartment. Not in any of the shelters or outreach centers he secretly visited in disguise. Each night he returned to his mansion. Marble floors, golden railings, cold hallways. All of it now felt like a prison made of his own choices. He no longer went to clubs, stopped taking calls from the board, stopped pretending he cared about stocks, mergers, and fame. And then, on a quiet Thursday morning, it arrived. A plain white envelope. No return address. But the handwriting on the front made his heart stop. Inside, a single sheet of paper, handwritten in soft, slanted lines. He unfolded it slowly, like it might tear if handled too roughly. He read, "I know what you did, but I forgive you. Not because you deserve it, but because I need to move on without hate. You were cruel, but I was real. I hope someday you understand what that means. Alice." His knees gave out. He sat on the floor in the middle of his grand entry hall, clutching the letter like it was the only thing keeping him alive. And for the first time in his adult life, he cried. Not silent tears, but aching sobs that came from the center of his soul. Ugly, honest, freeing. She had given him something he didn't deserve. Not just forgiveness, but a mirror. And in that mirror, he saw everything he had become, everything he had broken, everything he had to change. The next morning, he sold the yacht. The jet was next. He donated every dollar from the sale. Then he made the hardest call of all. He shut down the Limestone Club, the very place where the bet was born. He fired the toxic men who fed his ego and burned the list of names who once begged for his approval. He hired a new team, people with stories, with purpose, and he gave them one mission: to build a foundation that would lift up women like Alice, women from small towns with big dreams, women who had been overlooked, used, underestimated. He called it the Alice Foundation, and when they asked who Alice was, he simply said, "She's the girl who reminded me I have a soul." The sky was soft with morning light as Mickelson stepped out of the town car, his polished shoes crunching against gravel instead of marble. He looked around the quiet main street of the small town, so different from the skylines he once ruled, and yet somehow more powerful, more alive. 2 years had passed. 2 years of rebuilding from the inside out. Not his empire, his heart. And today, he was here not as a billionaire, but as a man trying to do right. The shelter he was visiting stood at the edge of the town, modest but warm. A small white building with vines climbing the porch rails and laughter echoing from inside. It was funded entirely by the Alice Foundation. He never missed the grand openings. But this one, this town, felt different. He gave his speech in a small, crowded room. Not from a podium, but from the floor, eye to eye with the women and children. He spoke about second chances, about failing, about learning what love really means. Not applause, not admiration, but respect and truth. As the final claps faded and people began to mingle, Mickelson stepped outside into the breeze. He closed his eyes, let the wind brush through his hair. It felt clean, honest, and when he opened them again, he saw her, Alice, standing under the old oak tree at the corner of the lot, wearing a pale yellow dress that danced with the wind. Her hair was longer, her face wiser, but her presence unmistakable. Beside her stood a little girl, no older than 4. She clutched Alice's hand, looking up at the world with the same quiet strength her mother carried. Mickelson's breath caught. He took a step forward. Then another. The world around him blurred. "Alice," he said, voice barely more than a whisper. His throat tightened. "I never stopped looking." She looked at him calmly, not bitter or angry. "Just real, solid, grounded, changed." "I never asked you to," she replied softly. Her words weren't cold. They were a truth she had grown into. For a moment, silence stood between them. Not awkward, not painful, just full. 2 people who had lived, broken, rebuilt. And for the first time, they stood as equals. Not billionaire and waitress. Not the liar and the one who was lied to. Not the one who gave everything and the one who took it. Just 2 hearts. Cracked. Mended. Still beating. Mickelson didn't ask for forgiveness. Not again. He didn't beg for another chance. He simply said, "Thank you." Alice looked down at her daughter, who smiled at the stranger with trusting eyes. Then back up at the man who once played with her heart. She nodded once. "Be the man you pretended to be," she said gently. Her voice was steady. "For real this time." He smiled through the ache in his chest. "I'm trying," he said. And for the first time in his life, he meant it with every fiber of who he was. As she turned to walk away, her daughter skipped beside her, and Mickelson watched them go, not with regret, but with reverence. Because not every love story ends in romance. Some end in redemption, and sometimes that's even more powerful. Final message. This story is not just about betrayal or forgiveness or love. It is about how truth breaks us and how grace rebuilds us. In a world still stained by pride, cruelty, and prejudice, let this be a reminder. No one is beyond change. No act of kindness is ever wasted. And sometimes the deepest love is found not in taking, but in letting go.